I really do think if you had a good, fair representation from a Calvinist, then provisionism would seem way, way, way more reasonable than Calvinism. And I think that's what many of them fear. For those of you who follow this broadcast for any length of time, you know full well that we love talking about Matthew chapter 22, the parable of the wedding feast. The king has a kingdom, which represents the nation of Israel, and the son is having a wedding feast, which would represent Christ and his kingdom. And entering into his kingdom would be entering into the feast that the king has prepared. And the king has servants. These servants would represent the prophets in the Old Testament, the apostles in the New Testament. These are individually chosen people from his own nation. They're Jews, in other words, that he has chosen to be the mouthpiece or the messenger for him. So he chooses to reveal himself through human means, through messengers, prophets, priests, kings, and so forth. So just like he chose Moses and Aaron, for example, they were chosen to be for a service. So chosen for service. So this is a servant, right? And they are taking the message first to their own people. The message goes first to the Jews. Invitation goes to the Jews. For the most part, the Jews reject it and try to stone the messengers. And so God, the king, sends out the invitation to the highways and the byways. It even says to the good and the bad alike. Go and spread the message to anyone and everyone and invite them to come to the wedding feast. Many show up. And the king sees one who is not clothed in the proper wedding garments, and he is cast out where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. And so the conclusion is many are called, but few are chosen. In other words, few are granted entrance into the wedding banquet. Now, what's the reason they are granted entrance? Well, they come in response to the invitation. So that's one condition. They had to come in response to the invitation. The second condition is that they're clothed in the right garments. What does that represent? Well, being clothed in the righteousness of Christ. And so what you have here are actually four choices of God. We oftentimes Calvinists think of election as just one thing. It's just God's choice of an individual before the foundation of the world to be effectually saved. But election actually contains many choices of God. There are many choices of God throughout redemptive history. This particular analogy or this story of Jesus illustrates four of those choices, not just one choice, four. And only one of them soteriological, the last one, the few who are elect. The many who are called involves at least three major choices of God. And what are those choices? First, the choice of the nation through whom the word would come. God chose Israel. And you have to ask yourself when we go through these verses in just a second, which of these verses are about God's choice of Israel to be the nation through which the Messiah would come? Because remember, as we say always, the concept of election in the scripture is never God choosing a nation to the neglect of the other nations. It's not what the promise is. He says, through you, Abraham, I will bless all the families of the earth. So he's choosing Israel to be a blessing to all the other families of the earth. There's a big difference between choosing a nation to the neglect of the other nations and choosing a nation to be a blessing to the other nations. And when Calvinists read their form of election into these passages, you ultimately have God choosing some people to the neglect of other people, and that's never biblical election. So keep that in mind. Same is true of the second choice, the choice of the individual messengers who are inspired to proclaim the message. This is the choice of the servants. He doesn't choose Isaiah, an Old Testament prophet, or Paul, a New Testament apostle, to the neglect of everyone else around him. He chooses them to the benefit of everyone else around them. And so God chooses individuals for service. So it's not soteriological. It's not like I'm choosing Isaiah to be saved through some effectual means to the neglect of everyone else. No, I've chosen Isaiah to be a mouthpiece for me, to speak my word. I've chosen Paul to be a mouthpiece for me, to speak and to proclaim my truth. And I'm going to accomplish my purpose through them, even when they're rebellious at times, even when they run, like Jonah. I'm gonna make sure my message is delivered through the individual messengers that I have chosen. And I don't choose them because they're better than somebody else or that are more deserving, but I've chosen them for this service. So being chosen for a service is important. Now I'm pointing these things out because when we go through this list of passages, you're going to see a lot of verses that have to do with God's choice of Israel and God's choice of his servants, which have nothing to do with individual soteriology. And yet Calvinists will use them and apply them as if they do. And I want you, good Bereans, to be aware of this, just to watch for it, okay? The third choice, the choice of those to whom the message would be sent. We know that the gospel goes first to the Jew and then to the Gentile. The invitations in this parable go first to the Jew, the people inside the city. When they reject it, He takes the message and he sends it to the highways and the byways to the Gentiles. Gentiles just means nations, all the nations of the world. So everyone who's not a Jew, the message goes to them next, right? And whose choice was that? It was the king's choice. He made that choice completely on his own. He's not sending the message to just good people or just rich people or just men or just the masters, not the slaves. He's choosing to send the message indiscriminately to anyone and everyone. Many are called. And so the choice of God to send the message first to the Jew and to the Gentile is his choice as the sovereign. He has the right to establish his covenant with whomever he wants to. If he wants to establish it with Jews, that's his prerogative. If he wants to establish it with the nations of the world, that's his prerogative. He's God. He can do what he wants to. And the Bible indicates that he doesn't just establish his covenant with the Jewish people, but it's through the Jewish people he brings the covenant, the law, the revelation of who the Messiah is, the Messiah himself, and his message, all come through this nation of Israel. They are chosen for this noble purpose, this honorable use, as you'll see in the scriptures. The nation of Israel is chosen for that. Servants from that nation are chosen for that. And he chooses the message to go through them to all the peoples of the earth, even the undeserving, okay? Especially the undeserving, right? Because everyone is undeserving, ultimately. And then the final choice, the fourth choice, is the sociological choice. So this is the choice we need to be looking for with regard to our point of contention. This is the choice of those permitted to enter into the wedding banquet. These are those who are saved. Who are those who are elected in this passage of Matthew 22:14? Many are called, few are elect, few are chosen. Are they chosen arbitrarily? Are they chosen just unilaterally before they're even born? Or are they chosen because they responded to the invitation in faith? They came clothed in the right wedding garments. What does that mean? Being clothed in the righteousness of Christ. So the condition was not their good or bad deeds. That's important to note. Just like the reason that Israel is chosen is not because of their good or bad deeds. The choice of the servants is not because of their good or bad deeds. The choice of who the message goes to is not because of their good or bad deeds. In other words, it's not because of their morality. And that's true of the last choice as well. No one's chosen based upon the good or the bad deeds they do, okay? But what the Calvinist does is therefore say, well, good or bad deeds would include faith, being clothed in the righteousness of Christ. So you're also not permitted entrance based upon whether you're clothed in the righteousness of Christ or not, because that would be a condition, and they have to have unconditional election. Well, there is a condition for election, obviously, in this passage. You have to come in response to the invitation, clothed in the righteousness of Christ. Those are conditions. It's not a condition of morality, your own righteousness, but it is a condition of the righteousness of the one who clothes you. And he clothes you by grace through faith. Faith is the means by which you're clothed, and you're responsible for that. If you don't understand that, or if you're not grasping that concept, then you're not understanding our doctrine of election properly. I have yet to find a notable or even unnotable Calvinistic scholar or YouTuber or anyone else who has been able to properly represent our view of election in a way in which demonstrates, to me at least, they're qualified to contend with us about it. And again, if you can find somebody who can articulate our view of election in that way, in a way that's reasonable and fair, then I would love to see it, because I have yet to see a Calvinist actually contend with our view of election. Instead, what you see is God peers through the quarters of time and foresees the goodness of the choice meat that's in the future and see how great they are. And God chooses that person based upon the foresight of he travels into a DeLorean and sees them in the future, and he knows that they're just great and perfect and good and they're worthy, and he chooses those people. And that's what Arminians believe. That's what those provisionists believe. Come on. Find me someone out there, please find me someone out there who is actually able to represent provisionist or even Arminian theology in a somewhat fair manner in order for us to contend with them, because it's almost impossible to find, especially among the leading Calvinists out there. It is embarrassing, really, to be honest. It's embarrassing for the leading Calvinists to so misrepresent their perspective. Heaven forbid they represent their Arminian counterparts or provisionist counterparts fairly so as to contend with them. And again, I know that sounds harsh, but prove me wrong. Please prove me wrong. I would love for you to prove me wrong. Find me leading Calvinistic scholars who are properly representing Arminians and non-Calvinists of the scholarly sort. And I would love to see that, because I want to play them. I want to actually contend with them. I invite them on the program, for goodness sake. Give them fair hearing. I'd love to hear a fair, good representation, because I really do think if you had a good, fair representation from a Calvinist, then provisionism would seem way, way, way more reasonable than Calvinism. And I think that's what many of them fear, is that if I present provisionism in the way they voice it and the way they explain it, then it may seem really way too reasonable in comparison to what Calvinists say. And then they wouldn't believe us anymore. I have to think that that's the reason that the leading Calvinists aren't willing to have us on their programs or to let us speak for ourselves or to represent us in any kind of a fair way.